Today is the 8th of April, 2009. We're at the Buffalo Erie County Historic Society, and my name is Wayne Clark, and my assistant is Kathleen Matthews. Sir, for the record, would you please state your full name and your date and place of birth?
Yes, my name is John J. Middle initial Hoefner, H-O-E-F-N-E-R. I was born in Buffalo, New York, in May 10, 1919.
Okay. Did you attend school?
Yes, I attended all my schooling was in Buffalo Public Schools. Graduated from high school, Bennett High School. I can't remember the date.
Okay.
And
now, did you go on to college?
yes, I went on to college. I wanted to be an engineer. I started college at Canisius because I had a science degree, and ran out of money after 2 years, and then I didn't go back to school until I returned from the service.
Okay.
When I returned from the service, I went to the University of Buffalo and received my Bachelor's of Science degree in engineering, mechanical engineering at University of Buffalo.
All right.
Yeah.
Now, do you remember where you were and what your reaction was when you heard about the bombing of Pearl Harbor?
That was interesting. A group of us were quite active in horseback riding at that time, and we were out horseback riding on December 7th. That happened to be on a Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
And we were horseback riding, and when we got back to the stables, we heard about the bombing of Pearl Harbor.
Did you know where Pearl Harbor was?
Oh, sure. Oh, yes.
All right.
Yeah. A lot of people don't know where Pearl Harbor was.
No.
Oh, okay.
Now,
That's one of the advantages, I guess, of a liberal education, that you, anyway, sure.
okay. And you went into the service the following October? 40?
No, I think it was a couple of years. I graduated from high school in 1936.
Right.
And I worked, and so I don't know exactly how long it was before I went into service.
You went in on 22 October of 42.
Yes, that was my induction date, right. There was a couple of times I got called up and was rejected because of my eyesight.
Oh, I see.
Because I always wore glasses.
Mm-hmm.
And then after a while, they needed people more badly than that, so,
Now, did you enlist or were you drafted?
I was drafted, right.
All right.
Yeah.
And so you were drafted. Where did they send you for your basic training?
Oh, basic training started at Fort Niagara, and I think we were there for about 3 or 4 weeks, and then we went to St. Petersburg, Florida, and continued the training there.
Now, at what point did they decide that they were putting you into the Air Force?
That was decided at St. Petersburg. At that time, when you were drafted, or when you were there at your basic training, you also they did testing.
Mm-hmm.
And again, at that time, you could request what you wanted. It didn't necessarily mean you were going to get it, but you could request it. And I requested the Air Force, and that's what happened. I also was very interested in shooting before I went into the service, and guns, so I requested to be an armorer.
Mm-hmm.
And so they accepted that, and they sent me to Buckley Field, Colorado, right outside of Colorado, which was the armament school.
Okay. That was after your basic training in Florida?
After the basic training, right. From St. Petersburg, I went to Denver, to Buckley Field.
What was your basic training like?
I guess I don't have any, all I remember is we had to do KP.
All right. Were you
we
in
had to do marching, and that's about all.
Were you at a regular military base or were you staying at a hotel?
No, we were staying at a hotel at the,
Okay.
yeah, at,
Was that your first time away from home?
no, no. My family, my mother and father, and I had one sister. We traveled a lot.
Mm-hmm.
They liked to go on vacations, and they took us on vacations, that sort of thing. So it wasn't. It was the longest of distance I was away from home, I guess. But
Okay.
yeah,
Now, once you completed your basic, where did they send you?
after basic training, they sent me to armament school at Denver, Colorado, Buckley Field.
Okay, and what kind of weapons did they train you on?
Well, it was on aircraft armament,
Okay.
so it wasn't all weapons. It was what was on airplanes, machine guns, basically.
Okay.
Yeah, but it wasn't rifles and that sort of stuff. So
All right.
it was strictly for Air Force.
Now, what was the training like? I've heard stories where you'd have to disassemble like a 50
Yeah.
caliber
Mhm.
blindfolded, and
Yeah, that's exactly what you did. They taught us about that, and they taught us how to do it. Then you had to do it, and it was basic training, if you will.
uh-huh.
Yeah.
Now, besides the 50 caliber machine gun, did they teach you anything about arming the bombs or anything like that?
Yes, yes. They did some on arming the bombs, and again, because you didn't know what you were going to do after
Mm-hmm.
that. And as I say, after mine, they sent me to a fighter group.
Mm-hmm.
And the fighter group, of course, wasn't really involved with bombs.
Mm-hmm.
It was strictly the machine guns and that sort of thing.
Okay. Now, do you remember approximately how long your training was in Colorado?
Excuse me. I can't remember. I think it had to be a few weeks.
A couple months, probably, or
It wasn't. It was maybe 8 weeks. I was wondering if it was here.
okay.
I can't see it. This happened to be a discharge. And on the back of your discharge, they had everything you did.
Okay.
For example, when you entered the service, when you were released from the service, and what your rank was. And I'm trying to think.
All right. Well, that's
No, they didn't have it here.
okay.
Yeah, here it is. Army Air Force, Buckley Field Aircraft Armament, 9 weeks, 1942. 9 weeks, 1942.
Okay.
I thought sure it had to be in here someplace.
Once you completed that training, whereabouts were you sent next?
All right, at that time, after we completed that, I was sent to a fighter squadron, which was, at that time, it was stationed at Tonopah, Nevada, Tonopah Bombing and Gunnery Range. At that time, it was a relatively new base. Now it is the base where those stealth fighters fly from.
Uh-huh.
But anyway, at that time, it was out in the middle of the desert. It was really nothing around there. I can't even remember. Tonopah, I guess, was, I can't remember the largest town. It was outside, quite a bit of outside. But anyway, and it was out in the desert there, and there was nothing there but,
Okay.
and
All right. What did you do there? Did you
at that time we had airplanes,
Mm-hmm.
and of course then we worked on airplanes. We worked on the armament on the airplanes, and
Okay.
at the same time the pilots were brought in to learn to fly the airplanes, and they were Bell P-39s, oddly enough, because which I was fairly familiar with. I'd worked a little while at Bell Aircraft before I went into the service.
Okay.
And so they were Bell P-39s, and they used them for training, and they were They were no longer used for combat in like the European theater, the rest of it. But so anyway, we were there, and there we were learning our skills. Well, you went to school to learn but here you had actually located of the guns on an actual airplane, and you worked on an actual airplane and that sort of thing.
Now, were you responsible for cleaning the guns after?
Yes. Well, yeah, when they were fired, you had to take them out of the aircraft and clean them and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Disassemble them and reassemble them.
Now, were there any problems that were fairly commonplace with the armament? Like jams or parts breaking?
Yeah. In the P-39 that we trained on, the Bell P-39 that we trained on, they had an unusual armament set up because they had a cannon that in the P-39 the engine was behind the pilot, and there was a long extension tube from the engine which went out to drive the propellers, drive the gearbox which drove the propellers. Well, in that tube that went through the propeller, it was hollow, and there was a 37 millimeter cannon. And Bell, the P-39 was the only U.S. ship that had a kind of cannon like that. And then they had also synchronized with the propeller blades. That means it shot through the propeller and synchronized so it wouldn't hit the propeller. Were 37 caliber machine guns up in the cowl, which is right in front of the pilot. And then on the sides, on the later versions of the Bell ship, they had two 50 caliber machine guns, one on each wing. And so each aircraft was different as far as the location of the guns and what guns they had.
Now, was it fairly easy to pull the guns out of the aircraft, or did it take quite a bit of work?
It was, on the Bell, it was easy to pull them out. And the only thing you had to be careful of is that with the machine guns that were mounted on in front of the pilot and fired through the prop, there was a synchronization device so you wouldn't hit the prop. And so that had to be tricky to get that synchronization done correctly, otherwise you'd put a bullet hole in the propeller, which happened. You know.
Now, those guns must have been pretty heavy to lift in and out of the aircraft, weren't they?
The 30 caliber gun, I don't know exactly what it weighed. I can't remember anymore, but I would guess maybe weighed 20 pounds. I wouldn't think it weighed any more than that.
Okay.
The 50 caliber gun was heavier just because of it was just the same gun except a larger size. It was just a blown up size, sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Now how long were you there in Nevada?
I can't remember exactly how long, but I would say it was about, 2 months. And after that, we were then moved into more permanent bases, and the one I went to was in a little town outside of Oakland, California, called Hayward, California. And it was across the bay from San Francisco. Actually, you can look across the bay and see San Francisco. And that was just a little field, and our squadron was the only group there. And so the pilots flew out of there and that sort of thing.
Now, what kind of living quarters did you have there?
We had pretty good living quarters. They were decent huts, but you know, the weather was good, and it was in a town and that sort of thing. So it was good. It was a lot better than in the desert at Tonopah. And
so you were able to go out at night or on weekends?
Oh, sure. You could go out at night, and you could walk the town. You know, the town was right there, and it was easy to walk to it. You could walk to the town. And the town was, you know, nice, and had a municipal swimming pool that we could go swimming and do that sort of thing. Sure.
All right. And once you left Hayward,
Okay,
where did you go?
well, once we left Hayward, well, we were on our way to combat.
Mhm.
And in our case, we were assigned to the 8th Air Force, which was in England.
Did you know you were going to the 8th before you left the
No.
States?
No, in fact, we didn't get to the 8th. We left Hayward and we met in the 3 groups, the 3 squadrons. There are 3 squadrons in a group, and each group in California was at separate little bases.
Mhm.
And we met in Idaho, Pocatello, Idaho, to combine them, and then we traveled to New York City
Okay, now how did you get to Idaho? By train?
by train.
And then by train to New
By
York?
train, right. And we didn't know where we were going, obviously, but we went to a base in New York called Cap Shanks, which is above New York City, not very far, I guess maybe 25, 30 miles outside of New York City.
Mhm.
And, but we were there and mobilized with a whole bunch of other people. And we didn't know this at the time, but we were going to go sail to England on the Queen Elizabeth. And that's what happened. We boarded the ship and
Mhm.
sailed out of New York, and because the Queen Elizabeth was a big liner and fast, there was no escorts, because they didn't have to worry about the submarines, because they were much faster than the submarines. So in that regard, it was a simpler crossing because it didn't take as long. But on the other hand, the Queen Elizabeth was a big ship, and there was, I don't know the number of troops that was on it, but it was thousands upon thousands of troops that were being sent to England. And our little squadron, or our little group, was just a smidgen of the number of people that were there.
Mhm. Now, did you get sick at all?
I could still see the Statue of Liberty, and I was sick. And I was sick all the way across. And I just do not like boat rides.
Uh-huh.
Airplanes don't bother me, I don't get sick, but I got sick, oh gosh, I got sick.
Now, do you remember the approximate date when you left for overseas?
Yeah. I got
Oh, I
it.
see, November 23rd, 1944.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
And, we sailed November 23rd, 1944. And we arrived November 29th, so you could see basically how long it took.
Yeah.
6 days where we arrived in Scotland, and were taken off Scotland, and then by train we were taken to our bases.
All right. And where did you end up at?
We ended up, after we got in England, we were assigned, oddly enough, to the 9th Air Force. And we were in a base called Raiden Woods. Very, very fancy. They have very fancy names, but we were located at a base there, and we were in the 9th Air Force, which was a tactical Air Force, not a strategic Air Force. And we were there about 2 months, and they needed more groups in the 8th Air Force, so we were relocated to Leaston, which was a base for the 8th Air Force.
Okay. Now, while you were with the 9th Air Force, were the aircraft flying missions at all?
No. When we were in the 9th Air Force, we didn't do any mission flying. We didn't have any airplanes.
Okay.
And so we didn't do anything. We just marched around and cleaned and that grunt stuff. And then after 2 months, we were then reassigned to the 8th Air Force and went to our base. And we were there for all the time I was in England, called Leaston. And
What was life like at that air base?
at Leaston,
Yes.
well, it settled in because we were there for a long haul, and we were there from when did we get the lease?
February 1944?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, it was a little longer than that because we had our first fighter sweep. We began operations at February 11th. So we probably got the leased it in January or something of that sort. And Leasted was an interesting little place. It was just a mile from the North Sea. And because it was a mile from the North Sea, it was cold.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the wind was always coming off the sea. But anyway, that's the base I ended up at.
All right. Now, were you living in the Nissan huts there?
Yep, Nissan huts, cold. In wintertime, they had a little stove that burned this peat. I guess it was peat that they have in England, and it's smoky and it doesn't give off much heat. Winter times were cold. There was no insulation, obviously, in those huts. So,
all right. Now I see, you were with the 357th Fighter Group?
Yes, the 357th Fighter Group and the 362nd Fighter Squadron. And on an air base, each of the squadrons is located in a different part of the base.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. No, I don't have. Each squadron is located in a different part of the base, and 362nd is located one here, 363rd, which was the other group, and 364 is another spot on the base.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes up the 357th Fighter Group. There's 3 squadrons in a group, and plus a headquarters where the colonels are and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And
Now I see that you were the first unit to receive the P-51s?
yes, we were the first Air Force group to fly P-51s, and that was a godsend for the 8th Air Force because they could fly a long way. They could fly way into Germany. There are other groups there in the 8th Air Force that flew P-47s, Thunderbolts, and that was really a good airplane, a big airplane, rugged airplane, but they didn't have the range, and so they could go across the channel and get to, just over the channel and into a little bit into Europe. They'd have to turn around and come back, and then the bombers had to go by themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when we had lots of bomber losses because they had no escort fighters. When the P-51s came and they were long range, they flew with the bombers all the way in and all the way back.
Mm-hmm.
So they gave them the protection of,
Now, did you ever get to go up in any of the aircraft?
not only once, not during combat, because you couldn't go in the P-51s
Right.
because that was a single-seater airplane. And there was a mission, a group of missions that they flew from England to Russia, and they bombed over on the way over, and then they came back and bombed over. So I was picked for one of those missions, which I volunteered for. You weren't picked, and then you were picked, and then I was sorry I did it, because then I found out what those poor guys and those darn bombers went through.
Yeah.
And it wasn't fun when that flak came up and you could see that and you could hear some of it hit the aircraft and, pinging on the sides.
So you went on one of the bombing
I
missions?
went on one of those, and I wouldn't go again.
Now, what was your position on that flight?
You were just kind of in the way. You were supposed to be a waist gunner,
Uh-huh.
and but more likely you were in the way when things were happening, the guys that knew what they were doing wanted you out of the ways, and, because you really didn't know what was going on.
Mhm.
And they were scared. I was scared anyway. Yeah, that's the only thing that I saw.
Okay.
And the only other time I flew in a bomber is, well, when they took us into Germany. They flew a group of us into the base in Germany that we were after the war, and they flew us in B-17s.
Okay.
And
Now, that one mission you were on, was that on the B-17 also?
yes, that was a B-17, right?
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, that wasn't fun. Those guys didn't have fun.
Mhm.
They were in a different Air Force than we ground guys were. Yeah, we ground fellows, you know, we always had a place to sleep and a place to, and things to eat and a place to eat, but those fellows that were flying combat, they did it tough. I talked to some of those guys in our 8th Air Force group, and most of the 8th Air Force group here is made up of all bomb people, because just more people
Sure.
bombers than us fighter guys. And I sure look up to them, what they went through. Yeah.
Now, at some point you left England? And,
Oh, after the war.
oh, it was after the war?
Yeah,
Okay.
after VE Day.
Okay, so you had stayed in
Yeah, we
England.
were there all the time until the war ended. And
Let me just go back
Sure.
a little bit. Do you remember where you were and what your reaction was when you heard about the death of President Roosevelt?
I'm trying to think. I remember my reaction, because I thought it was a sad thing, because I looked up to him even though I wasn't a Democrat.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked up to him and what he did. And, but anyway, I can't remember where I was.
Okay.
I can't even remember when he passed away.
I think it was in April of 45.
April of 45, then we were in England, and the war was just coming to a close at that time, because at April of 45 there wasn't much German activity anymore.
Mm-hmm.
They had been defeated by that time, and they just didn't give up.
Mm-hmm.
And because the war ended in May of 45.
Do you remember what that was like? Was there a lot of celebrating?
Yeah, a lot of celebrating, and the English celebrated it because it was their war over there, really, and they really celebrated, and they didn't give, excuse me, I remember they didn't give us furloughs because they didn't want us interfering with the English celebration. Because obviously in the celebration there was a lot of drinking and a lot of that. And so they felt it was better if we stayed out and let them celebrate the end of their war.
Mm-hmm.
Because we were still at war with Japan.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, how did you get along with the English people? Did you have much interaction with them?
Yes, some. Not too much. The interaction I thought was very good. I liked the English people.
Mm-hmm.
And
How were you treated by them?
All
Like when
right.
you went off base and...
all right, as long as you behaved yourself, people went off base, and what they want to do is drink as much as the English people could, English breweries could make, and that never worked, obviously. And I've never been a big drinker, and I didn't drink much. But a lot of fellows did just that. And but otherwise, the English people were nice, and they tolerated us. They had to tolerate us because we came and invaded their island.
Mm-hmm.
We ended up there with more people than there were English people, actually, more Americans. you know, with all the soldiers getting ready for the VE Day.
Mhm.
And so it was good. I enjoyed England.
Okay,
And in fact, I enjoyed it so much, I think we made 6 trips back to England.
oh,
Yeah, some on business, some on vacations, and, yeah.
all right. When the war ended, you ended up in Germany for,
After a month or so, we, oddly enough, we started off there, as I mentioned, in the 9th Air Force,
Mhm.
and then we got transferred to the 8th Air Force. And then after the war, they didn't need the 8th Air Force there anymore. So we got transferred, our group got transferred back to the 9th Air Force, and we went into Germany as part of Army of Occupation.
okay. Now, the group you went over with, were there any losses? Did you lose any personnel at all?
And, oh yes, lots of losses. Because it was a fighter group.
Mhm.
It was people who were flying airplanes, and airplanes either don't work all the time or they get shot down. And yes, there was heavy losses, and
Okay.
I'm trying to think maybe we even had the losses here. Excuse me a minute.
Sure. Now, whereabouts were you? Were you in I'm not sure in Germany?
In Germany, a little town about 20 miles from Munich, Germany, called Neubiberg.
Okay.
And it was a old German Air Force base.
Mm-hmm.
And it was extremely, for an Air Force base, we never had it so good because the barracks were brick barracks, and they had running water in the barracks and hot showers, and we never lived so good until we moved to there.
Now, how were you treated by the German people?
Well, there was no action at that time. There was supposed to be no interaction between the German people and us, because there was the non-federalization policy was in effect that time. And that went on until, I think, most of 1940, 45. I can't exactly remember when it stopped, but there was supposed to be a no federalization policy. And of course it didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, most policies that the Army and the government put don't work right. But obviously the guys wanted to go with German girls, and the German girls wanted to go with U.S. soldiers because they had lots of food and,
Mm-hmm.
had lots of money. Even the pay we got was a lot of money compared to what was in Germany at that time, because it was just a room. It was a terrible thing to see.
Mm-hmm.
It was just a room. And, yep, it was a shame that it had to be that way, but it did. And so anyway, as I say, I don't know when the fraternization policy ended, but when we went there was that policy, which didn't work, obviously. How could you keep, legislate, fellows and girls getting together and
Mm-hmm.
that sort of thing.
Now, were you in Germany when Japan surrendered?
Yes. Yes, Japan surrendered in August, I believe.
Yes.
I think it was August. Yes, I was there, and we got the word that we got the first word we got was the dropping of the atom bomb,
Mm-hmm.
the 2 atom bombs, and the war wasn't over. Japan hadn't surrendered at that time, and I remember we had discussions amongst ourselves in our barracks about the right or wrong of that atomic bomb, whether it was the right thing or the wrong thing. And I took the position I didn't like the atomic bomb, but it ended the war sooner, and
Mm-hmm.
less people were killed, less U.S. people were killed
Mhm.
because of it. So, yes. So,
Now, once the war ended in Europe and with Japan, did your air operations cease at that point?
well, we had no air operations in Germany
Mhm.
because there was no air operations to have because the war was over
Mhm.
in Europe.
So there wasn't any flying
You know,
being done or anything?
Well, we had airplanes, but there was some flying being done, but not much.
Mhm.
And of course, the flying being done was, again, the pilots that were there at that time were young, hadn't been in combat, and they were really still learning to fly. And so anyway, so there was just really nothing going on.
Okay. What did you do during that period of time? Just
Just clean up and
Uh-huh.
mess around and, you know, didn't do much of anything really,
okay.
because there wasn't anything to do. You know, we stood guard duty and that sort of stuff.
Mhm. When did you end up leaving Germany?
I think the beginning of November of 1945, or maybe the end of October, I can't remember exactly. And because they took us, we had to go by train to Marseille, France.
Mhm.
And there we caught a boat, a victory ship, to go back.
Mhm.
That's how we got back. We didn't have a nice big liner like we went over on.
Now, did you get sick going back?
I could still, we just got out of Gibraltar. I could still see Gibraltar, and I was sick. I was in the Atlantic Ocean, and I was sick. And I was sick all the way across. And that was a long trip. That took, I think, about 2 weeks, because it was a slow boat. It wasn't like the Queen Elizabeth and a fast boat. And it was stormy, and I got sick again.
All right, and once you
Yeah.
landed in the States, you were discharged from Fort Dix, New
Yes.
Jersey?
We went, as I remember, we landed at Norfolk and Virginia, and then we went up to Fort Dix, and Fort Dix was the closest to Buffalo, New York,
Mm-hmm.
and closest discharge there to Buffalo, New York, and that's how we went there. And so we did Fort Dix, and didn't do much there except get rid of our stuff, and
Mm-hmm.
we'll wait to get discharged.
Now, did you come back with your entire group?
No, at that stage of the game, the group was split up, and
Mm-hmm. Okay.
you got discharged by the number of points you had.
I
I
see.
can't remember what that was, but some people had more points, were gone earlier, and
Right.
some still had to stay there later. And so no, the group was all gone by that time, and there was no more group.
Okay.
Yeah.
Once you were discharged, you headed for Buffalo?
Yep.
By
I
train?
I sure did. Because Fort Dix was New York City, the first thing I did was get on the telephone and call American Airlines to try to get a flight,
Oh,
and I did. And I was fortunate enough to get a flight to Buffalo, except I never made Buffalo because of snowstorms. And we stopped off at Rochester, and we got off Rochester, and they got us a taxi cab to drive us to Buffalo. And but anyway, I was discharged by that time. I wasn't a soldier anymore. And
okay. And you got in a taxi?
Yeah,
Came home?
came home.
What kind of reception did you get from your family?
Good. My wife to be was at my mother and father's house. My mother and father lived in North Buffalo,
Mm-hmm.
and out near the university, and not the university now, but the university then, and they lived there, and so my wife to be and was staying with them, and so I remember the snow in Buffalo was a typical Buffalo snowstorm in November.
Mhm.
And it was the day before Thanksgiving. And, but anyway, my wife-to-be drove my father's car up to Bailey, I can't think of it right now, up Bailey Avenue and picked me up because that's where I had the taxi drop me off.
Mhm.
And, yeah, so that's how we got home.
Now, how long had it been since you had seen your fiancee and your parents?
3 years. Yeah, 3 years. Yeah. Because I guess I had a furlough just before we went overseas.
Mhm.
And, yes,
Okay.
but anyway,
All right,
it was
and
quite an experience.
did you make use of the GI Bill?
Oh, yes, I did. It was interesting, because life has to go on. And my wife and I got married on January 12th, 1946, because, and we took a week off for a honeymoon, and then I started back to the University of Buffalo a week later under the GI Bill.
Uh-huh.
And I finished my university degree under the GI Bill as a degree, a Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering.
Mhm.
And so the GI Bill was really, really a godsend.
And did you join any veterans organizations?
I never joined any veterans organization. I was too busy being married, trying to work
Mhm.
and get settled,
Mhm.
that I never joined a veterans organization until quite late, and when we had the 8th Air Force Association chapter here, that started, and I joined that and
Mhm.
became active in that.
Did you stay in contact with any of the fellows you served with?
Yes, I stayed in contact with a few. Oddly enough, there were only, I think there was only one other person from Buffalo, New York in our whole group. It wasn't even in the squadron I was in. And I never did, I met him one time at a reunion. He never got active in any reunions, but, and the most of the people that I knew were in California.
Mhm.
And I got pretty active with one fella in particular who was our group historian. And he lived in California, and I did quite a bit of work when after I'd retired. I was doing consulting work. I was doing a lot of consulting work out in California, and I would visit him quite a bit. And so we were close as anybody over the years.
Mhm.
And but as for the rest, I never met Steve.
Okay, and you've attended a number of reunions?
Yes, we used to have, I got into the 357th group alumni quite late in it.
Mhm.
And but yeah, then I used to attend yearly. I got active in that and attended reunions like in Long Beach, California, and oh gosh, I can't remember, Ohio, and a couple others, that we, where the Air Force Academy is. I can't,
Colorado Springs?
Colorado Springs, right, we had a reunion there, and I think I got some pictures of that.
Mhm.
And, yeah, So then after a bit, it was decided that, well, a lot of people were getting older, it was getting smaller and smaller, so they decided, well, just to close the hangar door and not have any more reunions. And so that stopped. And even though some of the people still got together. But anyway.
Now, how do you think your time in the service had it changed or affected your life?
Oh, well, I grew up.
Mm-hmm.
And the big thing I wanted to do that I learned that I should have done is completed my education. Now, it wasn't possible before the war because I just ran out of money,
Mm-hmm.
and like many people did. So that, that decided me that I just had to finish my education. And if I wanted to do what I considered good after, I had to have that degree.
Mm-hmm.
And that didn't work for everybody, obviously, and again, because I had 2 years toward my degree, it helped and that sort of thing. So it changed that way.
Mm-hmm.
It made me more mature of what, I was interested in and that sort of thing. And the other thing, obviously, I wanted to get married right away, too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So anyway, that's how it changed.
And you mentioned you have 2 daughters?
I have 3 daughters.
3 daughters.
3 daughters, yep. And, we have one daughter that lives locally, lives in Hamburg, New York, and one daughter lives in the Syracuse area, and our middle daughter lives in Anchorage, Alaska.
Oh, boy.
So anyway, we have 3 daughters, and we all grew up, they all grew up and were born and raised in Hamburg, New York, and graduated from Hamburg High School, and then went on from there.
Any grandchildren?
We have 2 granddaughters.
Uh-huh.
I have one granddaughter that's, about 33 now, I guess, that lives in the Rochester area. And I have my youngest granddaughter is 18, will be 18, graduating from Hamburg High School this June. So that's our family. Yeah.
All right. Well,
We don't have a big family. Yeah.
well, thank you for your interview.
Okay. Well, good
job.
Okay.
Okay, we have a picture.
Picture of that was taken of John Hoefner, taken in England in 1944.
All right, I got it.
Got it?
Do you have any other photographs or anything you wanted to show us? What is that? There's another photograph there.
Well, that's this Burl Olmsted and me when I visited him in California. I should have. Yeah, I did. Let me see here.
You were looking for something about the heavy losses of your group when we went on with
Yes.
conversation. The 9th group.
Yeah,
Let me just get a shot of this.
Sure. Well, that really is, it's just old guys there now.
And that was taken at his home in California?
Yes, in Paradise, California.
Okay.
Well, I'm sorry, I can't
No, that's okay.
find that.
Now, those pictures there, are
These? Oh,
those examples of your unit's insignia?
yeah.
Do you want to hold that up and I can zoom in on that?
Sure, here.
Okay, you don't have to take that out of the,
Well, we can do that.
okay. No, that's all right.
Or I can lay it down, or,
No, that's good. I can zoom right in on And those are examples of the
These-
patches that they,
Yeah, these
war-
are there's 3 squadrons in a group,
mhm.
okay? And these 3 are the squadron insignias.
Okay, can you face that towards the camera?
Yes. The top one here is the 362nd
Okay,
Squadron. That's the squadron I was in.
okay. All right, now what's that top one in the center?
The top one in the center, that's our group insignia, the 357th group,
Okay,
okay?
all right,
Could be, I may mention a couple other things.
sure.
We have in our group, we have a couple of pretty good alumni. You've heard of Chuck Yeager?
Sure.
Well, Chuck Yeager was a pilot in the what was he in? He was in the 363rd Fighter Squadron in our group. And then another one who quite famous, who wrote a couple of books. God, I can't think of his name. I will. Chuck Anderson, Bud Anderson. He was in the 363rd too. He and Yeager were good friends, and were, I guess, still good friends. Although Yeager has kind of dropped out of things lately. But anyway, they were in our group. They were in different squadrons, but part of the same group. And I'm still trying to look for that other thing, and I can't. But anyway.
All right, thank you for your interview.
Sure.